When I reviewed Test Drive Unlimited a few years ago, I really enjoyed it. I was caught off guard by how huge the map is. It's one of the largest I've ever explored in a video game, though putting a higher focus on a large map back in 2006 came with drawbacks, primarily making the whole thing feel empty and unfinished in a lot of places. But I still like the variety and casual approach to the open world racing genre, which was growing in popularity entering the next generation. However, for their publisher, this was a time when their spending spree in the early part of the decade had caught up to them and found themselves selling as many of the developers and IPs as they bought during the turn of the millennium, including the Stuntman franchise to THQ, Reflections Interactive along with the Driver series to Ubisoft, and their Melbourne-based studio who developed Test Drive Le Mans and the PlayStation ports of Test Drive Unlimited to Chrome Studios. And to avoid consumer confusion, Infogrames bought the rest of the Atari shares, so instead of just branding their games as Atari, Infogrames simply renamed themselves Atari SA. It's worth noting they also own another subsidiary called Atari Incorporated, which used to be called GT Interactive. Right? Makes sense? Cool. However, amongst the fire sale, Eden Games was one of the few Atari elected to keep on their books, and after developing Alone in the Dark, Eden Games announced a sequel to Test Drive Unlimited on March 2010. It was going to include a day and night cycle, weather effects, car damage, improved reflections, off-road racing, and set itself on a new island. And it was released on the PC, Xbox 360, and PlayStation 3 on February 2011. After the success of the review of the first Test Drive Unlimited, I knew I had to get a copy of the sequel at some point. And I remember picking this up at an antique store along with Juiced, another game I also need to review in the future, way back in January 2023, and even then, not even on YouTube, I haven't seen a single minute of footage until now. What the hell is this? It's a rich man's party where the music, dialogue, and character models look awful.
And here is your gift. Happy birthday!
Okay, that's one hell of a birthday present.
Don't be shy. Start the engine and go for a ride. All right, that's enough now. Wake up.
I knew it was too good to be true. Okay, I haven't had a first impression this laughably bad in a racing game since Need for Speed Undercover, and to mention that is a gigantic alarm bell ringing right there. Unlike its predecessor, it actually has a plot. You're a valet driver strapped for cash on the verge of being fired by Tess Wintory after arriving late. But she sees racing potential in the player, changes her mind, and invites them to enter the Solar Crown tournament, which she hosts, with one free slot available after another driver pulled out.
Let's see what you're worth. Take me to the club. Solar Crown awaits us.
However, realizing the player is rising up the pecking order, at some point Tess and her father Stuart feel threatened by that and start to employ desperate measures towards the end of the game, just like the plot of almost every racing game in the 2000s.
It seems that talent isn't always enough. You also need luck.
It's honestly a non-factor in the career mode, only here is an excuse to have a lot more dialogue and longer cutscenes throughout this game, and I really wish they did it from what I experienced. Again, these character models look like counterfeit Barbie dolls. Okay, maybe they're not as bad as the first Test Drive Unlimited with the way they smile at you when they give you the keys to a new car. They're quite creepy. Whereas here, it's easy to assume every woman in Ibiza and Oahu is related to Tess because they all have the same facial features. But when they open their mouth, it's fingernails on a chalkboard.
Let's hope you have more talent for racing than you do for dressing. Somebody needs to give you some advice on style.
The developers intended to make the player be a character in an environment with people who can realistically afford these sorts of cars and living the socialite lifestyle, which makes a lot of sense because Tess is agony in human form.
Yes, I know I'll be late, but it's the valet's fault. It took him forever to bring my car.
What? How could it? Oh, it's that guy who thinks he's a professional racer.
In fact, all characters here are rich stereotypes without any likable traits, apart from maybe Jane, who runs these dirt license tests. I don't know if that's how they are in real life, and Eden Games did their research. It's most likely a personality and interest clash going on here. But that's the vibe I get when playing this game. Going into a cutscene, whenever somebody opens their mouth, I'm like, ugh, shut up and let me beat you so I can have some peace and quiet.
Hello, Marco.
Hi.
The start of the game made me laugh, but after literally the next cutscene, it left a sour taste in my mouth, and I prefer to have it on mute and play my own music in the background. I suppose it is meant to be like that. Like, for many, it's the kind of cheesiness that adds to the charm of this game, whereas I just find this legitimately annoying personally, especially when you could tell the developers tried to make it work by bringing it front and center.
Welcome to paradise for surfers and for drivers. Yep, it's also paradise for beautiful cars. Come on, I'll be cool. I'll let you drive my new car.
At least they got the location right, Ibiza, a Spanish island on the Balearic Sea, what looks like a beautiful setting for a driving game. And of course, like Oahu, Hawaii, Eden Games were going to recreate it right up to the exact road placement with satellite imagery. Another good excuse for a holiday, right? Fun fact, a lawyer named Rafa who worked for a local government to promote the island at the time was a huge gamer and a fan of Test Drive Unlimited, and when he found out the follow-up was set in Ibiza, he got in contact with Eden Games to see if there's anything he can do to help with development. Additionally, Oahu returns, and I admit it's been a few years since I played that game, and being such a huge map, I can't exactly remember every road or landmark on this map. But comparing the two games, the sequel does have more drivable road, and visually it's been touched up. So I like that they haven't just copy and pasted from the first game. It looks a little more tropical, which make the maps look more like paradise. Again, like the first game, once you've driven on that bit of road, that part of the map, you can teleport to that spot anytime you want. So if there's anywhere like a dealership, store, or event, you can just go to the closest spot you've driven and teleport anywhere you want on this giant map. On top of that, because it introduces dirt roads and off-road racing, you can even outright drive off the roads to get to the destination faster, though exploring every piece of tarmac is part of the game, so it doesn't encourage map skipping, but at least it doesn't stop you. And because most of the events you enter are on roads you haven't explored, you're almost always driving on a different bit of road, which is why you might think it keeps the variety very high. But I've said this a lot now, the general caveat of recreating a real-life location to the exact road placements means they're not designed for video games. So most of it is just long straights and intersections, and being such a large map, no, having two large maps, they're not going to be as detailed as something like Midnight Club Los Angeles or Forza Horizon. Maps that trimmed down the scale but still gave you the illusion you were driving in the middle of these parts of America without looking like they were empty at certain points. And apart from the grass being dry, Ibiza looks too similar to parts of Oahu, especially in the outskirts, like they recycled trees and bushes from one island to another. The first game got away with these issues in some ways because of its scope and a casual approach to the story mode. This was 2006. And even today, Oahu alone, you have endless tarmac to explore, especially compared to Solar Crown. But the second game with the addition of Ibiza sounds ungodly. The question is, how much is too much? Like, how much of one thing are you willing to sacrifice for the other? It boils down to what you want to put the most focus on with the memory you've got and willingness to push the limits. It's the difference between... Okay, let's use Gran Turismo 5 for example, since it came out a few months before TDU2 and I just reviewed it recently. Exhibit A displays the best looking car models on closed circuits. Exhibit B sets one on the biggest maps in a driving game. Although it's also an example of one company having an unlimited budget and time frame and another being strapped to both back then. I just think at this point the map size became a selling point for Eden Games given they failed to learn from their mistakes from the predecessor. The larger it is, the more vulnerable you are to technical issues.
Cheese!
At first I thought it can't be that bad, at least on a console, but they are. They're what made the highest volume of my notes, just pointing out technical issues including cars you need to tail getting stuck, cars pinging on the start line like a Call of Duty multiplayer matchup, the frame rate is choppy when there are so many cars on screen at once, trees and bushes popping in on screen in the distance, uneven road surfaces, not as bad as the predecessor at least in Ibiza, but you can still easily scrape the body of a car. As you can see and hear, they added makeup but didn't clear the pimples. And I didn't record this at the time, but there was also a glitch at the start line of a license test when the car refused to either accelerate or change gear. And every time I restarted, it would always do the same thing. I had to quit the event and re-enter it to make the car comply. Apparently, the worst of the technical issues were related to the online servers. I kept getting connectivity issues, service timing outs, and opponents pinging as you just saw. Nothing to do with the player's internet it seems, at least if you're not from Australia. But the one thing that almost made me cancel this review was the save profile getting corrupted on the first attempt an hour into the story mode, and had to start all over again, making unskippable cutscenes a new pet peeve of mine, especially with these characters.
I'm going to crush it. reduce it to dust, blow it away.
So yeah, I had to replay back to where I was up to, which fortunately was near the beginning. Though every time I quit the game, I always made sure this icon wasn't on the screen at the same time. I was genuinely worried that every time the game booted up, I was going to lose all my progress. It's such a mess, I half expect an earthquake to set off on one of these islands at some point, and being a sequel where Eden Games had the feedback, but opted to add another large map without learning their lessons, there's no excuse this time. The structure of the Solar Crown tournament is a bit different, with all the vehicles categorized, A for modern sports cars, B for off-roaders, and C for classics, with license tests for all these categories, which initially made me sigh in disappointment, but at least these tests are a simple pass-fail, so they don't take that long. None of that medal nonsense in Gran Turismo. Okay, it's not nonsense, I just prefer something more straightforward, pass and get on with the events. New to this game is a ranking system which goes up from collecting cars, exploring the map, online gameplay, as well as winning events and challenges, which is a good way to encourage the player to do more than just the latter. On the map, just from free roaming, you can earn money from brave driving like close calls, jumps, and going top speed. The more stunts you perform simultaneously, the more bank you earn, though it's honestly chump change to be worth chasing after. The event types are similar to the first game, including races, time trial, eliminator, top speed, and speed traps, as well as random encounters scattered all over the map and have different challenges for you.
Thank you for your help. Goodbye.
At times I wonder why, for example, a woman would be that far in the middle of nowhere, she'd be unbelievably sunburnt by this point. And why am I stalking someone? Can they make these characters any more unlikable?
I think she's hiding something from me.
That said, combined with the fact that you're driving on undiscovered tarmac, the variety of things to do in Test Drive Unlimited 2 is very high.
Whoa! That's what I call speed!
Like the first game, Eden expected a lot of players to go online because it's literally all the developers talked about when being interviewed, which makes sense if you have maps this huge. According to producer Vince Farquharson, there were 180,000 logins in TDU2 despite having no DLC at the time. It was very popular back then. But here you have more interactive options like looking around your friends' cars, interact with them on these maps, and join in on the police chases.
You have committed too many infractions. You are now in pursuit mode.
There's even a DLC called Casino Online where you can engage in in-game gambling as another way to earn in-game currency to advance your online profile if you're feeling competitive. Unfortunately, I say had because online servers shut down in 2018 and the Xbox store closed down last month, so I can't even check out the DLC either. Now, if you have the PC version, modded private servers restore it back, so the option to play it online is there if you desire.
Oh, you come to the right place. Have a look around. I got some brand new models.
No, not as good as that Ferrari at the start. At least you get a few really good options for a first car. Ford Mustang, Lancia Delta Integrale, and Lotus Esprit. And I actually kind of like the aesthetic of the first home. Would have been better for a Wahoo. Graphically, this also looks more cartoony than the first game, like Sega Rally Revo, which shows in their cars. But eventually I warmed to it because it's more colourful and less slapped together like the HUD here and on the map. Like the first game, I like being able to control your player in first person, walk around and admire the models like Auto Vista from Forza Motorsport 4. Get inside, look around the interior, sound the horns, start the engine, rev it, and take it for a, well, test drive. You can do the same online with your friends, get in their car and have a look around. And I have to give credit for the detail of, like, Audi, for example, having an insane number of optional extras, just like real life. Like, it's cool to have paint job, rims, and interior options. Even the Gran Turismo titles didn't have that up to this point, and they're not aftermarket options either.
Here are the keys to your new car.
There are vinyl options as well, but don't expect anything as detailed as Need for Speed or Midnight Club. Other places you can walk around are your safe houses, which are scattered all over the map and customizable.
Okay, it's not the most luxurious housing, but I don't doubt for an instant that you'll quickly win a lot of money to buy yourself a beautiful home.
As well as shops to change your character's outfit and hairstyle. There aren't that many options to start with, but given I have no hair, there isn't much to change. Wait, $250 for a head shave? Are you kidding me?
I see you need a haircut. It's a good thing you came in.
Shut up. The avatar never changes even after the haircuts, by the way, looking like a generic valet driver in the profile pic while looking like Maynard James Keenan behind the wheel. But at least overall, it retains a lot of what made the first test drive such a casual game. Walk to places, pick up your car, explore the whole map right from the get-go. The way the game progresses, every championship you enter, a certain vehicle class and number is eligible, but it seems like every car is either not quick enough or not eligible until you unlock the final license, if that makes sense. You only have two options whenever a new event pops up, and I think for a game that's so open-ended in every other aspect, it's weird this one, so linear, stands out very easily, though at least you're using a different car in every championship you enter. It comes down to how much of the map you've explored by this point, I suppose. The more tarmac or gravel you've driven on, the more dealerships you unlock. And even with that said, it's also very easy for the first few hours of gameplay. Opponents, including Tess, barely put up a fight.
I said stop it!
Yeah, that was her reaction when I said that about her. When off-road, there's not that much of a difference control-wise compared to tarmac, apart from driving more slowly if they're not off-roaders, if you know what I mean.
You see, it wasn't that complicated.
Bikes do return, though, in the form of DLC, because the developers, according to them anyway, they wanted more time to refine the mechanics. Though given my feelings about motorbikes in the first game, it doesn't bother me that much. That said, the fact they were standard in the predecessor, but not here, is a step back in itself. There are 3 driving assist options, but otherwise control in a way that I have to think about my approach when going into a tight corner or intersection, using the handbrakes to avoid sliding, knowing what drivetrain a car has based on handling characteristics, the weather making a difference when it's raining. So overall, it's a mixed bag depending on the options. Cars feel like they're made of rubber, like pencil erasers. The body and the parts inside are made of that material. And as you just heard, when the roads get twisty no matter what the surface, cars feel like they have a block of concrete stuck in the boot. You never feel like you have full control over the car you're driving, like when it's on a certain angle or elevation, it's scripted to slide out in a certain way rather than having a proper physics model like Gran Turismo or Forza. Especially in the license test when you're forced to use no driving options when cars are prone to sliding in a straight line. At least you can have full assist turned on when free roaming and racing, because by the time you reach supercar territory, finding yourself driving on a map with roads pimpled like a teenager's face with oncoming traffic and obstacles that can put you to a complete stop. The last thing you want is a car that's incredibly tail happy. Again, it comes back to how unfinished the whole thing is. It's a shame because it has everything from the first Test Drive Unlimited that made it good. Same maps, huge variety of vehicles, being able to walk around, admire it, the event types, the casual approach to progressing through the story mode if you ignore the characters.
Stuart!
A lot of very good elements put together, but poorly executed, like it feels a few years out of date when it was first released. The maps should have been 40% shrunken down from their actual sizes, so you have more margin for error in the technical departments. Seriously, these issues are as bad as they say, even after updates. People complain about games today being released unfinished, but I bet Solar Crown on launch day won't be anywhere near as broken as this game in its current state. In fact, the way it plays and looks, this also comes down to the state Atari SA were in at the time. It is a perfect metaphor for where they were back in 2011, a large company with so many assets, but highly unstable with its finances. Just a couple of months after the game's release, Atari laid off more than half the staff at Eden Games, and they responded by going on strike. The next year, Eden negotiated to separate themselves from Atari, classifying them as discontinued activities to recoup their losses. But it was after they finally declared bankruptcy in January 2013 was Eden Games liquidated. However, on October of that same year, the developer reformed as an independent studio and is mostly known in the current generation for their Gear Club Unlimited titles. As for the Test Drive franchise, well, that was part of the clearance sale from Atari, but they weren't able to find a buyer until 2016, when Nacon bought the rights to the franchise and purchased Kylotonn, who were notable for the World Rally Championship, to develop the next Test Drive Unlimited title, which at the time of this video released only days ago. It won't be long until I figure out what that game is like.
But what happened? I lost? I need to get things back on track.
Thanks everyone on Patreon, including Anthony Cossins, Bibbs, Brittleback, Cooper Munn, Darcy McIntosh, Emmanuel Figueroa, Eric Barboza, Atmosphere, Indie DM, Mike Camilli, Peter GT, Roman Arteminov, Ruben Pekolk, Sam Sneed, Stefano Sivo, Tickford45, and Thomas Rosendale, as well as everyone for watching. At the time of this review being released, the follow-up should be out by now, and looking at the reception in its current state, I am completely unsurprised. I stream primarily on Twitch, the link is in the description below, along with Patreon, Discord, Twitter/X, Instagram, and Facebook. Thanks again for watching. Spenny out.